Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show. On this podcast, you'll learn from professional players, coaches, and executives from all over the world and see the court in a brand new way. And now, joining you courtside, your Gen Z host, John Hartofilis.
Hey, Coach Mike, what's going on?
Hey, John, how's everything?
Things are going great. So it's awesome to meet you again. I mean, just thinking about when we first met each other just a few years ago and the great trip we went on and all the fun times we had. It's awesome to finally have you on the show.
Yeah, man, that was, I can't believe it's been 3 years ago already. I feel like time's flying, but, I appreciate you having me on the show. I know you've had a lot of success with the show so far, so definitely excited to catch up and reconnect, but also talk some hoops.
I'm hanging on to those memories pretty tight. I'm still going to keep it at 2 years and 8 months until we get to 3 years in April of this year for sure. But just to start us off and really just reminisce on what to many is one of the greatest teams in the history of basketball. If you could walk us through one of the greatest teams, I would hope that you've ever coached, the 5-0 team in Greece back in 2018.
Yeah, well, it's honestly the only team I've ever coached has been undefeated. I don't think we're going to disclose the fact that we were playing with some 16 and 17-year-olds against some 14-year-old teams, but we can keep that to ourselves. But that trip was awesome. James Pistorius put that together. Was recommended to go on the trip by my good friend of mine, James McCullough, who's an assistant coach at Adelphi. And I think what made the trip special was just a group of people between all the coaches, the families, the kids, everybody made that trip special, and it just was a nice little bonus that we ended up winning every single game. And I think I should retire from Super League athletic coaching because I don't know if we can ever duplicate that again.
It will never be done. There's no way. Or if it is done, where on paper they're 5-0, it's the style in which it happened. I would say with the high flying dunks that would just really set us apart. But
did you get two of those? Or did you get one?
One. I got one in the second to last game, and it was the only dunk I've ever had in a game in my entire life, and I'll never forget it.
I think I'll let anybody forget it.
No, I mean anyone. I mean Thanas Tukumbo will never forget it being in attendance. Like I feel like everyone. It was just everything set up almost perfectly for it.
That is true.
I needed the ball to bounce off someone's face for that to happen. If you can kind of walk us through quickly, like your fantastic playing career, both in high school, winning championships, in college, all those great moments of your playing career, and how when you finally laced them up, you decided to go into this lifetime of coaching. For
sure. So, I was fortunate enough to play for a really good public high school program on Long Island, Kings Park High School. My junior year, we were actually the first team and still the only team in school history to win a Long Island championship. So we went to states. We made the state Final Four. And actually, oddly enough, this is before the time of social media. So when we got there, we knew a little bit about our opponent, but we didn't really know anything about the two other teams. And actually, the two other teams on the other side of the bracket were playing in the game before us, and they stopped the game to award somebody the all-time state scoring record basketball. And it happened to be Jimmer Fredette. So again, this is like before the age of social media, Twitter, Instagram. Like if that was today, we would have 100% known who he was. But we're right before our game. We're watching them. Unfortunately, we lost, but that was still a pretty cool memory from high school. And then I was fortunate enough to play Division III basketball at two schools. I went to Oswego for 2 years, and I played under two terrific coaches. One was Kevin Broderick, who's now the head coach at Nazareth University, and the other one was Adam Stockwell, who's the head coach at Hamilton College. I ended up transferring, wanted to get a little bit closer to home, was thinking about changing my major, so I transferred to SUNY Maritime. Our team didn't have as much success. I guess the one benefit, I was able to play a little bit more. So I finished up my playing career at Maritime. Truthfully, I got into coaching because I just wasn't probably good enough to keep playing. I love basketball, and I was like, what's the closest way I can stay involved in the game? And, when I transferred, I lost a year of credit, so I had to pick up a fifth year of school. And the new coach at the time, Jake Scott, offered me an assistant position. And that's kind of where my love for coaching started. I spent a year at Maritime, 2 years at Connecticut College as an assistant, a year at Vassar, 2 years at NYU, and then a year at Gettysburg. before I was able to land the head coaching position at St. Joseph's College. And, I think there was definitely a reason for why I changed jobs so many different times. But the main reason was I was just trying to learn from different coaches and gain different experiences working with different players, but also, every school that you recruit to has its own niche and every school is different. So it was a pretty awesome time. And, unfortunately this year we're not playing any games, but looking forward to getting back in the court next season.
That's awesome, and especially that story with Jimmer Fredette. It's crazy to think that one of probably the greatest high school player in the state at that time or in history could walk into the gym and people are like, oh, like he's he's good on the scouting report, and then you forget like all the things he's done and highlight tapes and all that. But when talking about your coaching journey and all the stops you've made and around just in so many different levels and seeing the game in so many different ways, what did you kind of take away from each and every one of them, and how have they helped you become the best head coach you could be at St. Joe's?
Yeah, so I think, ultimately, and I got this advice from everybody I worked for, and then when I was able to get the head coaching job, ultimately you have to be yourself, right? If you're not authentic in your approach, then I think your players and the people around you are going to see right through you. But it was nice to work for some really terrific coaches. BJ Dunn at Gettysburg, Jake Scott, who I mentioned before, is now the head coach at Cayuga College, which was just announced yesterday. Coach Neshi at NYU, who won over 500 games. So what I tried to do was take a little bit from each coach that I thought could fit who I am, and then things I didn't think would fit, who I am as a person or as a coach. I opted not to carry those over, but I think being at all those different schools and those different experiences, you just try to constantly learn from who you're working for, try to see the game in a different lens, and hopefully it will lead to success at St. Joe's.
That's awesome. And then thinking about the transition from assistant to head coach after having been an assistant for so long and in so many different places and taking all those lessons, how much has your responsibilities have changed tremendously going from assistant to head coach, but how has your relationship with players changed? How has your approach changed? Have any of those things gone through a transformation process with that new position?
Yeah, I think it sounds sort of cliche, but you go from as an assistant making suggestions to now you're making every final decision, right? Which is definitely a big adjustment. I don't know if you can ever be fully prepared for that transition. But it was definitely an adjustment. As far as my relationships with our current players, we have a really strong relationship. It's definitely different as a head coach than it was as an assistant coach, because as an assistant coach, you spend a lot of time, or at least I did, a lot of time getting in the gym with the guys outside of practice, working on shooting, different skill work. You almost became a buffer between the players and the head coach, and you always stayed loyal to the head coach. But I felt a lot of times, especially as a young assistant, that the players were more inclined to speak freely around the assistant coach and maybe a little bit more reserved around the head coach. And I'm probably finding that to be true now, in my second year as a head coach. But, we're pretty fortunate at St. Joseph's College. We have, we're a very young team. We have 13 players. 8 of them are freshmen eligibility-wise. So I think I might lose my hair by the end of next season. But, 12 of our 13 players are over a 3.0 GPA. We had a team GPA of a 3.38 this past fall. So they make my life really easy. Our guys don't get in trouble off the court. They do the right thing. So a lot of the headaches that could come from being a head coach, I don't deal with a lot of them.
That's awesome. And definitely such a blessing to have a good team that does exactly what they do on the court and the classroom as well. So on that idea of a student athlete, what is it that you look for when you're recruiting and going to gyms? What is it that you're really keying in on to try to find in seeing what the next recruiting class of talent should look like for St. Joe's?
Yeah, I think the first thing, that we look for is obviously talent, right? Because that's what draws the eye of the coach. Like, I think it's funny sometimes when coaches say, well, we try to find the best student first. Well, what if the student can't play at all? Then how does that work? So I think we ultimately look for talent first. And, some of the things that we really value as a staff is skill, like the ability to shoot the basketball, especially now with the 3-point line moving back in college basketball next year for Division III. Shooting is a premium, the ability to dribble the basketball, and the ability to pass, right? Anytime we can get a really good athlete we're going to be very excited about that. But I think it's more likely, especially at our level of Division III, that we're going to get somebody with skill, and maybe they're not quite as athletic as some scholarship level players. But as soon as we determine whether or not the student athlete is talented enough to play in our program, that's when the other stuff becomes of the utmost importance. And number one is grades. Like, you have to be academically qualified in order to get into St. Joseph's College, and it's not the easiest college to be admitted into. So number one, talent. Number two, making sure they're academically qualified. And number three, we call them OKGs, and we stole this from one of the Michigan State assistants. We call them our kind of guys. Like, we want good character people in our program, all right? We don't want to deal with any knuckleheads, any guys who are getting in trouble. So we go through a pretty extensive process to make sure that they are high character guys. We talk to their high school coaches, their AAU coaches. Nowadays, we talk to their trainers quite a bit. We'll even reach out to their guidance counselors, and we really try to vet whether or not they would be a good fit character-wise in our program.
Definitely so important to kind of look at all, make sure a player checks all those boxes before recruiting them. On that same note, though, what's your process like in recruiting? One of the biggest difficulties at St. Joe's College is not having a campus housing. How difficult is that for you to navigate and overcome when trying to recruit players?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I'll tell you this, JH, it allows us to focus on an area so much more, so we don't have to sit there as a staff and be like, hey, should we dive into New Jersey or Virginia or North Carolina a little bit more? We don't have that opportunity to even do that. So we basically work within a 40-mile radius. So our staff, myself and our three assistant coaches who are tremendous coaches, we really try to make it a point to know every single kid, especially every single senior on Long Island, right? So it allows us to be focused in recruiting. It does become a bit of a challenge when kids start telling you they're going to go away for college, and all of a sudden your list begins to dwindle because, again, we can't poach from different areas of the country. I think right now with COVID, it's become a little bit more of a challenge because, something that we hang our hat on, and which we did last year, is being able to attend so many high school games in the area. Like, I think we went to about 50 high school games as a coaching staff last year, and it allows us to show the recruits our support. We try to give them a lot of individualized attention. Right now with COVID and workouts and gyms really not being open, that has become a bit more of a challenge than maybe we even expected it to be.
Of course, and definitely on that idea of trying to find all these players and getting them to come to St. Joe's. What's something that a lot of these players, what's your advice to players and what they could do to get looks from St. Joe's College? What do you think, whether it's the players in your area or players that are interested, what could they do to really get your attention?
Yeah, and I think it's, for St. Joe's, and I think it's anywhere else too. I think reaching out to coaches and doing some self-recruiting goes a long way, right? Don't always wait for the coaches to come to you. Right, because we're recruiting so many different kids. Reach out to the coaches individually, whether it be at St. Joe's or elsewhere, but make the message personalized, right? Do your research a little bit about the school, about the program. Don't just send blast emails. I can't tell you how many times we've gotten emails from players where they think we're St. Joe's and St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, where Jameer Nelson and Delonte West played. We are not that school. We're not a Division I school. I can't tell you how many times players have addressed me using the wrong name, but making it personalized, attaching highlight films, attaching transcripts if available, and expressing some academic interests, I think can really expedite the process because it checks a lot of the boxes off that we would have to go through to initiate conversation.
That's great. And thinking about what you want to see out of these student athletes, what's something that when you see it and when you go to a game and to watch a player play and you see this, maybe it's in layup lines before the game or maybe the way a player acts during the game, what's something that'll make you walk out of the gym?
Something that will make me walk out of the gym? Oh, man. Probably the way they interact with their teammates. If it's in a negative way consistently, right? Now, I think we've all been there when we've thrown a pass to a teammate and he bobbles it out of bounds and we like throw our hands up and, we get a little frustrated. But if it's consistent, right, if we're constantly putting down our teammates, if we're constantly showing bad body language, that's something that will incline me to walk out of the gym. But then the biggest no-no is talking back to your coach, right? Because for us, that's probably not going to change from high school and then fast forward 6 months into college. So the way they interact with their coaches is super important. And then honestly, too, we vet and we try to look for how the parents are acting while they're at the games, right? Some parents, if you hear them yelling at the coach, yelling at the team, yelling at the player, coaching from the stands, that's a big turnoff for us. I don't know if it's necessarily going to make us walk out of the gym, but it may make us scratch our heads on the way out.
Of course, coach, it's definitely so important to make sure that players are treating everyone, whether it's their coaches or their fellow teammates, with respect. On that note, what is your bench area at St. Joe's look like when games are taking place? What do you kind of hope to promote in a strong bench culture?
Yeah, so we kind of assign our coaches different responsibilities depending on the game. So our assistant coaches break up the scouting report. So if it's your scout as an assistant, you're more focused on the game, matchups, what the other team is running, how they're guarding our stuff. But if it's not your scout, then one of your main responsibilities is bench decorum. Like, how are our players acting during the game, right? So first of all, when a guy runs off the court, everybody on the bench should stand up and give him a high five, right? And then they have to go all the way down the bench, make sure they get a touch from everybody. Maybe we have to change that now because of COVID. I guess we'll see. But they make sure they give everybody a touch before they come back and sit near their coaches and have a conversation. But we expect our guys to be super engaged. Like, one of our program standards is we are enthusiastic, right? The players at Division III are not on athletic scholarships. The coaches are not making $1 million to coach the game. So everybody in our program should be really enthused every single day while they're there, whether they're sitting on the bench during a game, whether they're at practice, because it's the love of the game that's driving us to be there, right? So if we can't get energized when a guy takes a charge, or we can't get energized when a guy puts down a dunk or pins a shot on the backboard or makes a great pass, then what are we doing? You know what I mean? So I would like to think last year, even though we didn't have a great amount of success in terms of wins and losses, our bench was very into it. But I do expect as we move forward to expect a little bit more of an energized bench from our team.
And when you brought up the every coach's responsibility, and whether it's that they're scouting the game or on bench or controlling the bench, what are the biggest stats maybe that you keep track of? Whether it's watching how the teams guard your plays, maybe it's advanced stats. What is it that as a head coach you really appreciate when your assistants give you detailed information on a certain thing? Yeah.
So when it's your scouts and things, like I mentioned before, we want to be mindful of how they're guarding what we're running. Right. So if, we're running ball screen stuff and they're hard hedging, like we want to be keyed in on that. Or if they're switching with certain players or they're going under screens, we need to be focused, right. And understanding like how they're guarding our stuff defensively. Some key stats, I think, we call them turkeys, right. If you've ever gone bowling, 3 strikes in a row is considered a turkey. We think that if we get 6 turkeys throughout the game, meaning 3 stops in a row defensively, then we're going to be in a pretty good position to win a basketball game. Every time we did that last year, every time we got 6 turkeys in a game, we ended up coming out on top. But unfortunately, we didn't get close to that number on too many occasions. So, and that's also something that keeps the bench involved too. If we get 2 stops in a row and they're, Farmingdale, for instance, is coming down for their 3rd possession, we're yelling to the bench, 1 more for a turkey, and then the guys seem to be a little bit more engaged on that side of the ball.
Also, so to get your team to get more turkeys, what are your offseason expectations in seeing them and the talent you already have, just to continue to get better? And off the note of focusing on recruiting, what your expectations are for the players to do on their own and getting better when they come back?
For sure. I think with the young group, like I mentioned before, 8 of our 13 players are freshmen. We're really excited about the players in the program, but especially in Division III, more than any other division, the coaches can't be on the court. We can't make anything mandatory until October 15th. And as soon as our season ends, we can't make anything mandatory after that, right? So we really need self-motivated players in order for us to, we call it move the needle within our program, right? In order for us to improve within our conference and to improve within our region, we really need guys who are self-motivated. So it's our expectation that, and we're trying to do this through recruiting, is we really want to recruit gym rats, right? Because we feel like in Division III, if a guy loves basketball and he's always willing to be in the gym, he's always willing to get shots up, lift, condition, we really feel like we have a chance to improve. And I think there's a lot of guys, maybe they're on the thin side coming out of high school and they need to gain muscle, but they're really skilled. We feel like if those guys love the game, they're willing to be in the gym all the time, then if they come to St. Joe's, like, we can get them to be in a position to be successful. The great thing about St. Joe's, really in comparison to anywhere I've been, is the accessibility to our gym, right? Once the student is enrolled in our college, they have access to our gym 12 months out of the year, which is so rare really at any school. But to have access to your college facility 12 months out of the year is something really special. Even now with COVID going on, I know we're not playing games. Our gym is open every single day. Yes, they have to wear a mask currently while they're in the gym to work out. But the gym is open for them to go get shots up, work out with their teammates, and hopefully improve so that when we start on October 15th next year, we're already ahead of the 8 ball.
Coach Mike, thank you so much for coming on. This was absolutely fantastic. I mean, just reconnecting with an old friend, an old mentor, and hearing about all the amazing things you've been up to, and obviously all the great things you've been doing as the head coach of St. Joe's since the last time we spoke. It's really been just great, and thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, JH, thanks for having me. It was awesome reconnecting. I'm super happy for you and everything you've done with the podcast. And, anything I can do to help, please let me know.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.